Modern.
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 We're prepping for a voyage.
Modern.
The force of an old-fashioned equals whiskey mass times bitters acceleration.
Why don't you make that a double?
Modern BARCART.
What's shakin', cocktail fans? Welcome to episode 196 of the Modern BARCART podcast. I'm your host, Modern BARCART CEO Eric Koslake. Thanks for joining me for this interview episode where we track down the best and brightest minds in the spirits and cocktail world so that we can share their secrets with you. This time around, I hang out with Jayme Blaschke, creator of the Lagoon of Mystery and host of A Moment of Tiki on YouTube. He's a home tiki bar architect and a renaissance man when it comes to tropical botany, exotica, calypso, and bossa nova music, current tiki trends, and more. This is somewhere between a crossover episode and a very nerdy deep dive because Jayme is the creator of a home bar build-out blog and a YouTube channel devoted to tiki drinks and culture. As you can imagine, we cover a lot of ground in our conversation, which means that now might be an ideal time to pause so that you can make yourself a drink. This episode's featured cocktail is the Chief Lapu. To make it, you'll need 3/4 of an ounce of dark Jamaican rum, 3/4 of an ounce of light rum, 1 ounce of passion fruit syrup, 1 ounce of lemon or lime juice. Lemon is traditional, but go for lime if you want a little bit more of that malic acid pop, and 1.5 ounces of orange juice. Combine these ingredients in a cocktail shaker with ice, give them a good healthy shake for about 15 seconds, and then strain into a glass filled with crushed ice, garnish with an orange wedge and a few pineapple fronds, and enjoy. There's not a whole lot of drinkware consensus out there for this cocktail. I've seen it served in a lowball bucket glass, a hurricane glass, and even in a hollowed out pineapple. So my recommendation would be to use any vessel that can accommodate the liquid in the garnish, which means that the Chief Lapu cocktail is probably a great excuse to break out your favorite tiki mug if you've got one. This drink has a great story behind it, as Jayme and I will discuss later in the episode. It's a wonderful example of a slightly off the beaten path cocktail that holds its own next to the giants of the tiki world like the Mai Tai and the Zombie, but that also encourages us to explore the history and geography responsible for tiki and tropical drinks. That's a fancy way of saying that the real-life Chief Lapu is credited with defeating in battle a very prominent European explorer, so be sure to join us in the lightning round if you'd like to find out exactly what happened. So, now that your tiki mug is full and your seas are free, hopefully, from enemy sails, let's turn our attention back to the interview. In this tropical deep dive with home bar architect and tiki expert Jayme Blaschke, creator of the Lagoon of Mystery and host of A Moment of Tiki, some of the topics we discuss include how a brush with homelessness and an offhand comment made while floating in a pool spawned a passion for tiki and led Jayme to build and cultivate his beautiful home tiki bar, the Lagoon of Mystery. A virtual walkthrough of some of the building materials, design choices, and escapist landscaping that morphed Jayme's Texas poolside patio into a transportive oasis that plays dive-in movies during the summer. Some thoughts on how to relate to tiki culture as a white guy, which Jayme and I both are. We offer perspectives and concrete resources that'll help you learn about colonialism, appropriation, and how to celebrate tiki tastefully in the 21st century. A fun romp through the many genres of island-appropriate music that you can use to flesh out your tiki playlist, including exotica, calypso, bossa nova, and modern indigenous compositions that will whisk you away to a tropical landscape. Along the way, we discuss what kind of tiki bar could boast a mechanical bull, how to avoid weevils in your bamboo, why not to drink green beer with J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and much, much more. This, folks, is one of those shows where you're going to want to check out the show notes. If you listen through and want to hit up one or more of the dozens of resources that Jayme drops on anything from woodworking to tiki mugs to growing palm trees in Kentucky, we'll have them for you. If you do catch one that we miss, kindly shoot us an email at podcast@modernbarcart.com or feel free to message Jayme directly on Instagram and we'll be sure to point you in the right direction. The last thing I'll say before we dive in here is that I'm a huge fan of how Jayme leads by example. In every aspect of his passion for tiki, he does the work. He knows the plants in his garden. He can rattle off musicians and albums from many decades of exotic music. He knows what Don Beach was doing in 1937 as opposed to 1936 or 1938. And while tiki, to some, might represent a getaway or a reprieve from the modern world, you get the definite sense that for Jayme, the escapism of tiki is an escape to a place like the Lagoon of Mystery rather than an escape from real life. With that, I hope you enjoy this extremely fun and more than occasionally nerdy deep dive with Jayme Blaschke, creator of the Lagoon of Mystery and host of A Moment of Tiki. Jayme, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Appreciate it.
So let's start by introducing you to our listeners. Who are you? What do you do? And why are we here talking today?
Well, Eric, I am a recovering journalist who now works in media relations. I write when I can't help myself, and over the years I've published a number of science fiction and fantasy short stories in various markets, a bunch of music and book reviews, a bunch more interviews with authors and artists who are far more talented and successful than I am. I also published a nonfiction history of the infamous Chicken Ranch brothel a few years back, which your listeners may be more familiar with as the best little whorehouse in Texas. I've never worked in the beverage industry, but am a cocktail enthusiast who has a home tiki bar called the Lagoon of Mystery, which is why I presume I'm here talking with you now.
Indeed. I'd love to kick this off by telling our listeners the story of the Lagoon of Mystery. As I understand it, from sort of a big picture point of view, it involves a place called New Braunfels, Texas, and a pool of a certain shape. So why don't you give us the whole backstory and how that led to the Lagoon of Mystery and your now YouTube channel?
Okay, well, I live in New Braunfels, Texas, which is a not so small. It's growing pretty quickly, but it's a small town right north of San Antonio. It was founded in 1845, for your history lesson, the epicenter of German immigration to Texas. Today it's known best for Wurstfest, which is a 10-day salute to sausage, and Schlitterbahn, which is the world's largest water park. It is not known for tiki. It has almost no tiki whatsoever, except for my home tiki bar, and actually a couple of artists who are associated with the tiki scene live around there as well. To make a long story short, 2014, my family and I were almost homeless. We had sold our home, and the house we were going to buy, the deal fell through when our building inspector came out with his eyes white and said, "No, you don't want to live here." So we kind of scrambled around, and the home that we're in now had been out of our price range, but they had come down in the interim. So we were able to actually get it an incredible steal. I expect federal agents to kick down our door any day, to arrest us for it. But this house had a swimming pool surrounded by palm trees and a 65-foot covered patio that was made for entertaining. Had it not been for that house, my wife and I had had this discussion, we would never have known tiki existed outside of the 1950s. So one day we're floating in the pool, and my wife just pipes up spontaneously and says, "We need a tiki bar." So I said, "Okay, I can do this. I have some modest woodworking skills." So I put together a standalone bar to go outside under the covered patio, and that was our tiki bar. Well, hey, it's got a little bamboo on it, it's got some thatch, and I thought I was pretty hot stuff. Fast forward to, say, December of 2016, for some reason I was looking online and just typed in home tiki bars, just as, I don't even remember why anymore, but a website called Tiki Central came up, and on it there was a message board that was entirely dedicated to home tiki bars. And that blew my mind. We have Disney Imagineers, Pixar executives, all sorts of people, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people across the country that had dedicated spaces in their homes to home tiki bars. And some of these are spectacular. I mean, just mind-bogglingly complex. And I looked at my little thatch and bamboo standalone bar and said, I have to up my game. And so it has been a very deep and twisty rabbit hole ever since that I've been falling down. Alice has nothing on me. I still haven't hit bottom, all these years later. And it's really fun because we have a swimming pool right there. And it's not a huge swimming pool. It's huge for us because we've never had one before, but it's 11,000 gallons. So it's a comfortable size. I got the idea, actually my wife suggested it. She comes up with all the best ideas, to put a screen, a drop cloth. Basically, it's a canvas drop cloth. It's super low tech. Drop it from the edge of the patio, the covered patio, and set up a projector on the opposite side of the pool. And we have dive-in movies. And so during the summer, we have various movies that we screen, old Elvis films, Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon beach flicks, all sorts of different things, various fun summer event films, and we always pair a themed cocktail with it. Last week we had our first one in over 2 years because of the COVID gap, and we screened Elvis Presley Girls, 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 and the featured cocktail was the Velvet Elvis. Not tiki, but it was fun, and everyone had a blast, and we had a great turnout, and a good time was had by all.
Man, that sounds like a whole lot of fun. I love the dive-in movie concept, and one of my favorite movies, I suppose, of that genre, maybe a little bit less tiki, a little bit more oceany, would be The Endless Summer. My father-in-law is big into surfing, and he introduced me to The Endless Summer, and I think that's a fantastic movie to screen on such an occasion as a dive-in setting when you've got tiki drinks flowing, and it just sounds like a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, and that's absolutely a great movie. It's a travel log, or the best surf locations around the world, especially like South Africa, when they have to trek for miles and miles over dunes and these uninhabitable, end of the earth, just to find these standing waves where they can gently cruise across the bay. I mean, that's fantastic. I had no idea that such waves existed or anything, because I'm not a surfer. Texas is not exactly known for a coast that lends itself to surf, other than when hurricanes occasionally hit. So, that was a fun movie to watch.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I wanted to talk with you here today, we've had some interactions. You listen to our podcast. I've subscribed to your YouTube channel. You were kind enough to shout our podcast out on a recent episode that you dropped, kind of going through some of the podcasts that you listen to on a regular basis. So I'm super grateful for that. But also, you have a wonderful Instagram presence, and I feel like I've learned a lot, not just about tiki, but about the, I guess, practical sort of concrete materials of tiki, whether that is the plants that exist in your Lagoon of Mystery, whether it's the the drinkware that you're using, or the flowers that you're showcasing. Like when I look at your Instagram feed, one of the things that is abundantly clear to me is just what you mentioned earlier, that you're falling down this rabbit hole, that you still haven't hit bottom yet, and that it seems like an incredibly gratifying and spreading hobby. And I guess, not being somebody who would define myself as like a hardcore tiki person, I just wanted to have the conversation, because from an outside observer's perspective, what you're doing is fascinating. And I want to introduce our listeners to that, in case anyone out there is sort of nurturing this little tiki hobby. We're still in a time when it's great to be able to have these at-home hobbies, because we're still kind of gradually recovering from COVID and all this stuff. We've got some variants flying around that people are a little bit freaked out with, and despite the inordinate cost of building materials and other things, I still think this is a great time for people to be interested in that sort of hobby. So Before we go any further, can you tell us like any other, I guess, improvements or I guess things about the Lagoon of Mystery that you'd like to feature as a tiki bar, like anything you're particularly proud of, I guess?
Well, yeah, sure. Tiki at its heart is escapism. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be immersive. It's a fantasy vacation where you can pretend the real world troubles that you have to deal with every day, your concerns at work or school or family. You can pretend they're an ocean away. That's why all the best commercial tiki bars don't have any windows. You don't want the exterior world intruding. Me, I don't really have that because mine is outside. I can't really black out the sky or anything like that, so I have to depend a little bit on the landscaping. Fortunately, we had several sable palm trees, which are familiar to people on the East Coast in Florida and throughout the South. They're fairly cold tolerant and grow large and impressive. I supplemented that with some bamboo fencing, have added in hardy hibiscus. People may be familiar with Rose of Sharon bushes, also called Althea, which is deciduous. They lose their leaves in the winter, and as soon as spring comes back, they burst back out into leaf and flower. There are also the native mallows, which are North American types of hibiscus, which die back to the ground, but as soon as the ground warms up again, they spring back up. So they can survive up into areas of like Nebraska or the Ohio River Valley, much, much colder than any tropical hibiscus ever could. And the flowers are big, showy, and impressive. I've long been fascinated by passion flowers. They grow on vines. They create passion fruit, which, some are edible, some are even palatable. But they have these spectacular, intricate, showy flowers that are very, very intricate and tropical looking. Plumeria aren't really hardy any place in the U.S. apart from Southern California and Florida, but they're easily grown in pots and kept at a reasonable size. And there are other trees. I have loquats. Loquats are relatively hardy for Central Texas. We had a brutal cold spell back in February where the temperatures got down to like 9 degrees for a week, which is, it's never been that cold here. And I'm, 50 something years old. So a lot of plant life that had been well established here, didn't make it. So you got to find out what's hardy and what's not. I lost a couple of loquat trees, but, other places in town had others that survived. They have a big leafy tropical look to them. Feijoa bushes, which are also called pineapple guava. Spectacular flowers, edible fruit. They're really popular in New Zealand, throughout the tropics. They came through fairly unscathed, big, bushy, tropical appearance. So it's really layering and styling your space, your outdoor space. Bananas. I have some fairly hardy banana plants. They are all killed back to the ground by the freeze. 9 degrees is minus 12 Celsius for your international listeners. So, we're not talking about just a little frost. But they've all sprung back and they're growing. They're about 10 feet tall now over the course of 4 months. And that adds a lot to the ambiance. For someone looking to try and do some tropical or tropical-ish gardening in more temperate areas, there is a book I'd like to recommend. It's called Palms Won't Grow Here. And let me see if I can come up with the name real quick. David Franco. David Franco, yes. He's based out of Kentucky, I believe. And some of the palm trees and tropical plants that he has managed to grow and cultivate and keep surviving from season to season there is really impressive. So I think here in Central Texas, I have it easy compared to some of the other people where you have actual winters most of the time.
Sure. And for folks who are listening who may have a bit of a green thumb, what zone is that?
I'm in zone 8B, which is not tropical. You can think most of Florida, the northern part of Florida is 8B, whereas the southern tip of Florida is like zone 11, and they can grow coconut palms, which, if you open the refrigerator door close to them, they'll die. So that's...
Wow, that is a really impressive context to have. I mean, yes, certainly in Texas, you're definitely in a zone of the U.S. that I'd say a good chunk of the U.S. population can't really compete with in terms of being able to keep some of these things alive. But I appreciate the book recommendation. We'll definitely link to that book in the show notes. And folks who might be somewhere like me, that's, I think I'm in 7B here in DC. It's not exactly the most hospitable climate for certain tropical things, but I'm still able to grow a bunch of super hot peppers and other things that tend to like the heat. So if you're anywhere from the mid-Atlantic sort of south and you don't have super alpine climates, then chances are you should be able to at least play around with some of these plants that we've been mentioning or others that you can find in that book. One of the reasons why I appreciate the botanical side of things with you is because it seems to be an aspect of tiki that just keeps on giving. And it doesn't have anything to do with the drinks. Now, when I think of other, I guess, cocktail traditions, the only one that I can really think of as an archetype would be something like the Prohibition era speakeasy. Maybe you've got your swing dancing, you've got your dark room with the password, you've got this air of illicitness and secrecy. But outside of that sort of speakeasy culture, I can't really think of any other type of cocktail culture that is as unique and sort of stands out on its own like tiki does. And when you compare tiki to something like that speakeasy culture, you don't have those little side passions like botany and, like we'll get to later, the music that's so unique to that cocktail tradition. And so I really like it because there's been a lot of calls for I guess frankly cancellation in the tiki world. Tiki, for better or for worse, has gotten where it is today by a certain amount of appropriation. Don Beach and Trader Vic were just a couple white guys who ended up appropriating some of these island cultures in the process of creating all these wonderful drinks. And so that is, certainly problematic in many ways. But then I look at your Instagram and I see just how much fun you're having with plants and with music. And I was like, man, that's not hurting anyone. This is wonderful. It seems like a wonderful passion to be able to dive into. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if you wanted to maybe dive a little bit more into what tiki is and what tiki means to you, or your particular brand of tiki for that matter.
Okay, well, yeah, I have thoughts. I have opinions. Not sure how much people want to hear from a middle-aged white guy who's overweight, but, there's no shortage of opinions on this subject. Tiki is escapism. It's immersive. It's the fantasy vacation, which we've already touched. And a lot of people don't realize that Don Beach and Trader Vic did not create tiki bars. In fact, I was discussing it with Sven Kirsten before this interview, doing some research on where the tiki bar term originated. Now, Sven is a German filmmaker who is a transplant in California, and he has written the Book of Tiki, Tiki Modern, Tiki Pop, and several other books. He was an outsider, came in, was fascinated by this decaying remnants of this tiki culture that he saw, and he investigated it. And up through the 60s, they were generally called Polynesian restaurants or tropical restaurants, tropical themed. From the 40s and 50s, post-World War II, themed restaurants, immersive restaurants, not just tiki, were very common and very popular. So in that aspect, tiki, well, pre-tiki, wasn't an outlier. It wasn't until the 1950s when Stephen Crane got involved, and he started incorporating carved tikis into his restaurants, the Con Tiki, the Luau in Beverly Hills, and Ports of Call, that the tiki started becoming associated more with these pseudo-Polynesian restaurants, which, to be honest, borrowed as much from the Caribbean as they did from Polynesia and Oceania, the exotic tropical getaway resorts.
Yeah.
When I was first starting my build in 2017, in June, there was the Hapuna Kuna controversy in Corvallis, Oregon. It was an individual had opened a tiki bar, and it had used a significant amount of Hawaiian imagery, Hawaiian gods or whatever, but presented them in a way many of the indigenous people living in the Pacific Northwest found disrespectful. And there was a significant controversy about that. And the individual, to his credit, after some initial resistance, apologized, said he hadn't realized what he was doing was offensive in any way, and altered the theme of his tiki bar and changed it to the Salty Dog and made it more nautical. You occasionally have controversies like that, and that was the most high profile. And at the time I was thinking, well, should I even call my place a tiki bar, a home tiki bar, whatever? And after thinking and looking at the landscape, I realized that what I called my place really wouldn't make a difference, because everyone else in general was going to call it a tiki bar. You have in Florida the typical chicky huts that originated with the Seminole Indians. Everyone calls those tiki huts now. Anything that has thatch or bamboo, the general public has attached tiki to. And again, it wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that tiki bar became a term for what we now know as tiki bars or restaurants or anything like that. And it wasn't the tiki culture that brought it up, because tiki culture at that point was effectively dead. It was kind of the general public. That said, here we go, old white guy pontificating now. I think, in my opinion, the appropriation debate is kind of a distraction from the real issue. The real issue being the legacy of colonialism. Appropriation is a symptom. There is a fuzzy line between appropriation and cultural exchange and cultural appreciation. What is one to one person is something different to another. Personally, I say, I try to don't be an asshole. If someone is troubled by what you're doing, that's a red flag. You need to step back and take a second look at it. There is a group, the Pacifica Project, which your listeners may find very interesting. It's organized by indigenous people of oceanic descent who are in the hospitality industry, Mariah Kunkel and Samuel Jimenez, and they are not necessarily telling people how they should build a tiki bar or what they should avoid or what they should do, but they're putting articles and books and commentary out there so you can educate yourself and you can understand the perspective of these indigenous peoples, because they're not gone. They're not extinct. They still live here. If you have any knowledge of the history of Hawaii, you would be flabbergasted why the hell these people aren't up in arms trying to, strangle every white person they come across. I mean, there's a book called Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's last queen, Liliuokalani. And it's horrifying that American businessmen essentially moved in, staged a coup, and deposed a sovereign ruler so they could make money and eventually fold Hawaii into, the United States territories. And the same story repeats over and over. You had the Maori in New Zealand, where the British Empire launched a centuries-long campaign of attempted extermination. They didn't succeed. There's the Cook Islands, Fiji, Tahiti with France, the Rapa Nui, which is what many people know as Easter Island. Not only were they driven nearly to extinction, there was a Western narrative about the culture that is almost 100% false, that they are victims of their own environmental destruction and warfare. It was not a warring culture. They did not destroy their environment. They adapted to an incredibly hostile environment and actually thrived there for centuries. So many of these narratives that have been perpetuated over the past 200 years or so are just incredibly off base, and all these Oceania cultures were really thriving and very advanced. As far as seafaring, as far as agriculture, they were thriving in their environment. And, for Westerners to come in and kind of pat them on the head and say, y'all are quaint here, let's put you on a postcard, that's insulting. And I can understand why indigenous peoples would be offended by that. Another interesting person to follow is Chucky Tom. She's responsible for, she or they, I'm sorry, I'm not really sure what their pronoun preference is, but Chucky Tom is responsible for the Doom Tiki pop-up, which is a metal tiki concept that avoids indigenous imagery altogether. So that's a long, roundabout way of saying you just need to be aware. You need to think and say, is this going to be damaging to someone? There are some people in Polynesian cultures that enjoy tiki bars, enjoy the homage, so to speak. There are others that are gravely offended. And there are people who fall in between. I don't have a lot of oceanic friends, but some of whom say they enjoy tiki mostly, but okay, this over here they're a little uncomfortable with. I pay attention to that. And, I'm still learning. I don't have all the answers. If I had all the answers, I'd be a lot wiser than I actually am. But, listen, be aware, be careful, and be comfortable.
I like what you have to say about the cultural exchange, because if you think about it, if you're not listening, then you're not exchanging, you're just taking, right? You're just if you're just, saying, well, I like this little tiki guy here, I'm going to take him, and ooh, I like that picture of the woman in the hula skirt, I'm going to take that, and you just assemble without, really closely listening, then you're really not taking part in cultural exchange. You're taking part in the actual cultural appropriation side of things. So I think you're right. I think listening is a key thing here. I also don't think that tiki is really something that should be subject to cancel culture, because I think what we would lose in that process is a whole bunch of delicious drinks that I don't want to lose. And when I think about the prospect of tiki sort of fading out due to outrage, I just think of a less delicious world. And that's, a less delicious world at the end of the day is not something that I can support. But one thing that's interesting to me about tiki is the important role that kitsch plays in the escapism. I read something about this a while ago. And if you really think about the proliferation of these Polynesian style restaurants, these themed restaurants, and then subsequently the evolution of these things, as you described, into tiki, the escapism is really sort of in direct response to World War II. Now, of course, Don Beach and Trader Vic were creating these cocktails before the Second World War. They might have been trying to escape something else, namely the Great Depression. But, after World War II, when so many American service people went to the Pacific and had these horrific experiences, there really wasn't a lot of thinking going on. You didn't want to think back to what actually happened there in the Pacific. You kind of wanted to have something that stood in as a placeholder. And so that's why I think, you get this Disneyfication, you get this kitchification of what tiki is. It's not real, as you mentioned, it's not real Polynesian culture. It's a Polynesian themed restaurant that then evolved into a tiki bar. And I think the cool thing about this whole debate that we're having is that today we are now in a place where we are able to look back. We have enough distance from some of these cultural traumas to be able to look back and say, okay, what did we actually do for all those decades? And how can we make this better? Like the Doom Tiki thing, where it's like, man, this just turns out that this kitschy and really fun cocktail concept is prime for riffing and bringing it off into the, all these other domains. I could see any number of fun sort of Doom Tiki style riffs being done. And I think that I'm excited for more of that to happen, just as I'm excited that more of these resources are getting out there. And I think that another great way to make sure that you're doing good listening is to subscribe to some of these resources that you listed, Jayme. So we'll definitely link to a bunch of those in the show notes as well. I guess to wrap up this section, are there any sort of resources that as you built this Lagoon of Mystery, whether they're books or podcasts or blogs, like you mentioned, are there anything besides what you've already mentioned that you think would be instrumental in helping any of our listeners who might also be interested in taking their tiki game or their home tiki bar to the next level?
Yeah, there are quite a few resources. Unfortunately, the best resource that I would have recommended, Tiki Central, is a website. It's currently down. It's been down for, since almost the beginning of the pandemic. It was an old bulletin board, message board style site, which that turned out to be its downfall because its coding was more than 20 years old and is no longer compatible with modern servers. So rumor has it that all the data is preserved and it is going to be modernized and uploaded and restored at some point in the future, at which point there will be much rejoicing. But, Tiki Central is a side project for the owners who have full-time day jobs, and so it's not necessarily a priority. After that, Facebook, again, is probably the best resource. There are a couple of groups on Facebook. Home Tiki Bar builds, drinks, and research. On Facebook, there are a couple of tiki groups that are useful. One is Home Tiki Builds, Drinks, and Resources. Another group is All Tiki Bar Builds, where people go on there and share what they're doing and trade inspiration. Does a lot of what Tiki Central used to do. Tiki Central was more easily searchable than Facebook ever will be, but there's a lot of real-time interaction. You have a lot of traffic flow there, and people are willing to share lots of information. Tiki Pop by Sven Kirsten, that is one book of his that is still in print. It just came out in a smaller, more compact size. It's not quite digest size. It's still a really heavy, thick tome. It's chock full of pictures and history of Polynesian pop, the phenomenon that we look back on today and say, oh, well, that's kind of tiki culture from the 1930s on, where it emerged from Hawaiiana, the obsession with Hawaii, and evolved over the years. And that is great because it gives you a good perspective of what was and how it progressed and eventually died out in the 1970s. As far as building goes, if you have woodworking skills, then you're in good shape. If you don't, there are a lot of resources online now that didn't exist back when I started being self-taught, and therefore you can avoid a lot of the bad habits that I've picked up over the years. But there's a podcast called Wood Talk Online. It's a conversation of three guys, Mark, Shannon, and Matt, and they're freaking hilarious. It's just nonstop one-liners. I'd say it's the woodworking equivalent of Car Talk, only none of them do really Buddy Hackett impressions. They're funny and they provide a lot of useful information. Each one of them has their own independent solo media channels as well for different approaches to building. One does hand tools only, one is hybrid hand tools and power tools, and the other one built his own sawmill. So these guys are hardcore and they know everything there is to do. And there's others on YouTube as well. Crafted Workshop has good projects you can learn a lot of techniques from. Stumpy Nubs is a woodworker who's been around for decades and people swear by him. So you can learn a lot just from your house, just clicking the mouse and looking at other YouTube video websites. There's real easy, basically spoon feeds you a lot of the information. A lot of what I've done, I've used bamboo harvested from a local area where there's a big windscreen grove of bamboo. If you're in California or Florida, you might want to be cautious about this because Asian bamboo weevils are an issue in those states. They haven't really reached Texas, so safe there. But Bamboo Ben, who is a professional tiki bar design and builder, shared a video with me a couple of years ago about a house where they harvested their own bamboo in California and did the walls in it. And then after about 6 months, these weevil eggs started hatching. And it was like a termite infestation just throughout their house. They had to tint the entire house. So you got to be aware of that. To treat, there are a number of ways to treat. The most common way is a solution of borax and boric acid soaked in there because that kills insects and renders the bamboo untasty, unpalatable for them. I've never really done that. I use a flame treatment on there, but bamboo is common, and in temperate areas of the U.S., it'll grow. There's native bamboo. If you're throughout the South, there's river cane. That's a native bamboo, and it grows profusely along the riverways, and that there's no reason that can't be used for home tiki builds.
Mm-hmm. Stumpy Nubs. I don't know if I would trust him with my woodworking advice. It seems like he's down a few fingers. No,
I think that's a ironic title right there. These woodworkers, they're all about the humor.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all these resources, man. I'm gonna have my hyperlinking work cut out for me on this show notes page, but that's great. That was the point here, is to get a bunch of resources aggregated, because obviously, as somebody who's done this work, it's tried and true. You've got this wonderful home tiki bar, and I'm really grateful for you sharing the things that have made a big difference for you as you've developed your tiki hobby over the years.
That was one of my intents when I first started out. When I started building it, I said, okay, this is going to be a big project once I realized what scale it was going to be. So I started documenting each segment of my project on my blog and document as a build along. And so for several years, I included every step. I'm redoing the deck here. Okay, that's one of the segments. I'm installing a booth here at the end. Okay, that's a segment. I'm, putting up bamboo matting on the walls. Okay, that is going to be a segment. And so each of these blog installations, I kind of do a how-to, basically documenting all my mistakes so any readers can avoid treading the same ground. Since I started the YouTube channel, A Moment of Tiki, that's kind of transformed and transferred there. I haven't done as many blog posts on the build along, but that has become more in the visual. So I recently completed a faux lava wall, accent wall, drawing on some mid-century modern and tiki traditions to put something up there, as a transition in the Lagoon area. And so that's one of the more recent ones that I've done. And it's, kind of been fun. I have no audio-visual background. It's all self-taught, watching lots and lots of YouTube videos on how to film and edit and sound check and all the other stuff. So, yeah, I'm just sharing my pitfalls and screw-ups and accomplishments, because I figure, man, if I can do this, anyone can do it. The bar is set really low. So.
That's how I feel about some of my audio and video efforts. So I'll definitely refer folks to the blog and the YouTube channel. Those links will be very, very prominent on the show notes page. Can you just give us the name of the blog in case anyone just wants to search for it?
Yeah, it's on Blogspot. It's JLB Gibberish. That's JLB, then Gibberish. When I started it back in 2004, somebody had already taken gibberish because I couldn't think of any apt description that was more appropriate for what I had to say.
Gotcha. So if you look that up, you'll come across it. We'll link to it in the show notes. So knowing that you have most of your pitfalls there, any real quick ones that you would warn our listeners against, like anything that you would recommend to somebody who's just starting out that would save them a lot of time and effort on the home tiki build side of things?
Well, look at your space. That's the main thing. My space was outdoors, and it has dictated a lot of the build. I haven't dictated so much of the build. The space available has dictated what I'm going to do. It's outside. It's 9 months of the year. It's pretty warm and humid. So I knew on the ceiling I couldn't put lahala matting or anything that was going to be very vulnerable. For it could, humidity could cause mold issues. We have mud daubers, spiders, insects, and everything. It didn't want wasps building nests there. And so, okay, how am I going to deal with the ceiling, because you can't have white ceiling in a tiki bar? Well, I look back to the old Southern tradition of painting porch ceilings blue. And so, okay, I've got this pool over here. I'm going to do this whole lagoon theme. So I painted the ceiling blue and painted silhouettes of sea creatures from underneath. And I have projector lights that shine moving water ripples up on it at night. That would never have happened inside if I were doing an interior build. But because of necessity, because of the unique situation with my outdoor space, the space dictated that's what I was going to do. And so when you're going to start off, just give your space a good look. If it's interior, outdoors, if it's sprawling, if it's long, if it's narrow, if it's square, if it's an unusual shape. A lot of people build them in their basements, which is great because you don't have that many windows to cover up. Let the room tell you what it wants to be. If you have high ceilings, then you can hang a whole heck of a lot of spectacular stuff there. Flotsam and jetsam and lights and fish and trophy, all sorts of stuff, and netting. If you have really low ceilings, then you're going to approach that space entirely differently, because you're not going to be able to have a whole lot of stuff hanging down. So don't feel that just because other people you've seen online are doing this in their tiki space, you have to copy this, especially if it's not really going to work for you. Find out what your space will allow and go with that. It's the judo style of tiki design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you take the energy that you're given and you redirect that energy. I like that metaphor. The other thing that I will add on to that is that if you're working with a bit of a blank canvas, it might benefit you to imagine people and bodies and drink builds being in that space, because it's one thing to look at a space when it's empty and say, here's what I'm going to put this over here, and then there's going to be that, and before you know it, you've built yourself into a corner where the space has too much clutter in it, or you've made a decision about plumbing or something like that may come back to bite you in the future. So it's good to almost take your time with it and imagine, like, all right, when this space is built out, what am I going to want to do in here? How many people am I going to want to have in here on average? And what's going to be comfortable? Do I want a separate seating area? Do I just want a bar with 4 bar stools? There's a lot of questions to be asked. And of course, you're going to need somewhere to plug in that Hamilton Beach stick blender. So there's a lot of things to take into account. And I think imagining bodies in there is a big step in that direction, because otherwise, an empty space can very quickly get away from you, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a good point with the water. If you're going to have a dry bar, you need to plan where you're going to have a dump bucket. When you mix your drinks and stuff, where's the spent ice going to go? How are you going to clean your glassware? If you have access and can tap into water, which I was fortunate enough to be able to do, and have drainage, then you can put yourself a sink there and you have a wet bar, and that's a lot more convenient. But it's a sliding scale. Is it going to be more trouble to try and install and force plumbing in this area, or do you have something readily available? It depends on the space available and what that space can accommodate.
So we've talked so far about your home bar journey. We talked a little bit about tiki and how you and I feel about, sort of the state of tiki, what we think the values and maybe some of the potential pitfalls are. We've talked about some great resources for building a home tiki bar. We have one aspect left of setting an ambiance that I've been really, really curious about recently, because I know next to nothing about it. And this is another great thing about following you on Instagram is that you are into the exotica music genre. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that genre, how you got into it, and maybe recommendations for anyone else who's interested in starting to explore this really niche, but also crazy interesting style of music that also is, in my opinion, one of the key parts of building an ambiance for a tiki bar.
Well, it's funny because if you talk to old-timers, tiki purists, and I say that with all affection, they will insist that exotica is the only appropriate music to play in a tiki bar. Except that when Don Beach and Trader Vic started off their respective locations, exotica didn't exist. Les Baxter created exotica, invented exotica as an offshoot of jazz in the early 1950s. And it was the late 1950s where Martin Denny popularized it, and it became a huge phenomenon. So you've got 2.5 decades there where there was no exotica to be played in any tiki bar. What they would be playing was, more likely than not, hapa-hali, Hawaiian music. And so that's absolutely appropriate. Hapa-hali basically means half white. So it was Hawaiian songs and tunes that were done with English lyrics. And again, talking about appropriation, most of the time it was performed by session players in Los Angeles, as opposed to the originators, the natives in Hawaii. So, there are some issues there, although hapa-hali has kind of gained a respectability or a place in the history as a legitimate art form into itself. But if you're, really interested in it, the Hawaiian Renaissance in the 1970s really gave rise to some phenomenal indigenous artists there. You had the brothers Casimiro. Mountain Apple Company produced a tremendous amount. Well, they still do music albums and stuff. That's where Brother Is, from Somewhere Over the Rainbow fame, got his recordings published there. Dancing Cat Records publishes a lot of music from Hawaiian slacky guitar players, which is a fascinating instrumental discipline. And then you expand beyond Hawaii, because Hawaii isn't the only Polynesian culture out there. There are indigenous groups like Te Waka, which includes Maori and I believe Guam performers. And they have a real contemporary sound that is absolutely tropical, but brings a lot of modern sensibility to it. They're totally infectious, and their music was the inspiration for a lot of the Moana soundtrack. They've gone on tour, and going beyond, and going back to exotica, Les Baxter established it. Les Baxter did all sorts of stuff. Exotic was just a small part of his output. He did Ritual of the Savage, which is considered a classic. Then you have Martin Denny, who I addressed earlier. Arthur Lyman was a long-time, very prolific jazz performer who produced so many exotica albums, dozens of them. And you have modern groups as well. Ixtawele, out of Sweden, of all places, has done some phenomenal modern takes on the exotica approach.
I love this. I've run into Martin Denny, and I have also run into, is it Arthur Lyman?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple of good playlists on YouTube. We'll link to at least one of them in the show notes page. And there's some really good resources out there. And it's so fascinating to hear you put it all in context, because of course, there was no genre for this when it all started out in the 1930s with Don Beach and Trader Vic. And I think that's one of my big takeaways from this conversation with you is that, like, you really need to sort of step back and say, like, all right, here are our assumptions about tiki. Let's do a little bit of reading and research and check and see if these are true. And then also, like, well, tiki is all about escapism and sort of putting yourself in a happy place. So I suppose that the death metal tiki concept that you were mentioning earlier, that they're probably not playing any of these traditional exotica soundtracks. They're probably playing things that are much more hardcore. So I can see a bunch of different expressions of this. And I love that there's some flexibility to it. And I think being in touch with the history allows you to, I guess, be a little bit more intentional and explicit with the choices that you're making for your home space and for the music that you like. And, are you a Hawaiian slide guitar person, or do you really want that weird kind of eerie, ethereal theremin playing in the background? Like you have some really great resources and really great options when it comes to decking out your bar, not only with the visual stuff, but also with the auditory stuff as well, which I love.
I apply the same escapist remove to my music selection as I do to the whole build out, because I've been to tiki bars where the owner wasn't into tiki. They were chasing a trend and didn't get the ambient music of exotica or any of the related genres. And so, okay, we're going to play boy bands from the 90s and get the energy pumping and pack in a younger crowd, or other things like that. And, sometimes if they're kind of half-hearted into tiki and know that, modern top 40 isn't appropriate, they'll just put on reggae. And I'm sorry, I don't think there's really anything wrong with reggae in a tiki bar. A lot of people will argue with me about that. But they need to put in more thought to it than just Bob Marley's greatest hits. Reggae is not just Bob Marley. In my home bar, I play calypso. And that's, again, not just Harry Belafonte, but most people don't realize how huge calypso was at the very end of the 1950s. There are artists from the Caribbean, Mighty Sparrow, Lord Invader, Calypso Rose, were huge. I mean, rum and Coca-Cola was stolen from Lord Invader by Maury Amsterdam, who claimed it for himself, and there was a big lawsuit against it. But, Robert Mitchum recorded a calypso album. Maya Angelou recorded a calypso album. Josephine Premis, a great Broadway performer, recorded a calypso album. There's a lot of really interesting calypso out there. Bossa Nova, I think, is perfect for tiki bars. Some people will say, oh, Brazil's not tiki. Brazil is tropical. Brazil is escapist. Brazil has as much place in tiki as the Caribbean. You got Stan Getz, you got Jobim, you got Gilberto, you got Carlos Lyra, you got Charlie Bird. Bossa Nova is great. And going from there, you can get into the Cuban Latin sound, Desi Arnaz, the big band sounds of Edmundo Rus and Xavier Cugat. Really fantastic stuff. I know a lot of people like to play Rat Pack stuff, Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., get into the easy listening, get some Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, maybe Baja Marimba Band, Julie London, Jackie Gleason, his albums he put out. Ultra Lounge, get a modern swing on things, play some Combustible Edison. All of those are of a different time. They're all transportative. They will take you someplace else and contribute to that illusion. If you're hearing WAP playing really loud or something like that, yeah, that's not really going to contribute, I don't think. Hey, if you want to play it in your home bar, go for it. But I don't think it quite works. I think you have to be strategic about it. I think you have to have a vision. You can make almost anything work if you have the vision and follow through with it. One of the things I like to make a comparison of, some people will say tiki is totally made up, so anything can be tiki. Well, what about the gillies in Urban Cowboy? How about the mechanical bull? Is that tiki? Is John Travolta on the mechanical bull tiki? Anything can be tiki? Well, no, but dial it back a little bit and think. The Panoleo culture in Hawaii was a cowboy culture. Existed for a couple hundred years. There was a lot of cattle raised, and it was a vibrant culture. There are Paniolo songs. You could do a tiki bar, not cut out of whole cloth. I mean, you don't want to get into the cultural issues, but get some consultants, work in there, make it a tribute to the Paniolos. I could see a complete and total justification for having a mechanical bull in a tiki bar. if you do your homework and if you do it right, and you're not going to try and cut corners. So, if you have your vision, follow through with it. Follow through with it. And you can make it work, but you really have to think things through.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting from this conversation is that it's absolutely within your rights and totally encouraged for you to do whatever you want. But what there's no excuse for, it seems, is not doing the groundwork or not doing the research first and then using that to do whatever you want. And so I mean, I'm personally just blown away by your encyclopedic knowledge of all of these different genres of music. As you were talking, I thought of other different, types of soundtracks. I could see a Buena Vista Social Club working in a certain tropical bar format, different things that are more or less popular these days, but that are still very easy to locate and download. So, I'm really grateful that you were willing to go down that little rabbit hole on music, because it's something that I'm not very well versed in, but that I'd like to become a little bit more versed in as we go here. So I think that's a great place to wrap up the main portion of our interview. Do you have a few minutes for a couple quick lightning round questions?
Absolutely. I was born ready. I just want to dial back one thing a thought just popped into my easily distracted brain about using the term as tiki. I know that there are a number of individuals and places that are trying to move away from the term tiki drinks, tiki cocktails, because of the concern and the connotations. I'm not really sure that is going to accomplish what they hope, because if tiki and tropical are not interchangeable, the pina colada is a tropical drink. It's not a tiki drink. Tiki drinks have more of a history of the craft cocktail, of the balance. When you start getting into tropical drinks, that kind of slides towards boat drinks, which are overly sweet, overly sugar, unbalanced, and what, tourists who don't really care on vacation drink because that's all that's available. And I don't know if that's really the messaging that wants to go out as far as talking about the quality of the drinks or the context of the drinks, because if I go into a bar and it says tropical drinks, my expectations are going to be different than if I go to a bar that has, maybe not a tiki bar, but has a menu that says tiki drinks on it. I that may be splitting hairs too much for a number of people, but until more precise terminology comes around, I think that's a clear distinction that probably needs to be maintained somehow. My 2 cents.
Well, yeah, it's a challenging thing, and I think honestly, what to call something is a little bit more challenging than actually just the raw materials of that thing. There's a lot of people who have a lot of different opinions, but that's why I tend to want to focus on the drinks, on the music, on the plants, because there's very little controversy around the flowers that you've planted or the different rums that you've blended into your drink. And so that's where I tend to stay to continue to enjoy the genre. But it has been really, really interesting to hear your takes on all this. And I really appreciate not only the nuance that you bring to it, but the amount of research that you've done, because it's certainly more than I've done. And it's given me a lot of good little data points and hooks that I can look into on my end to make myself better.
This episode is brought to you by Near Country Provisions. If you're like me, here are some things you might be like. You live in the Mid-Atlantic. You enjoy meat. You highly prefer that your meat is local, sustainable, and comes from ethically raised animals. And you'd absolutely love for someone to deliver it to your door once a month. If this sounds like you, then you need Near Country Provisions in your life. Head over to nearcountry.com and check out their different, highly customizable meat delivery packages, and also browse their growing seafood selection. As a thank you for being a Modern BARCART listener, you can get 2 free pounds of ground beef or bacon included in your first order after subscribing if you enter the code BARCART, all one word, at checkout. That's BARCART, BARCART, at checkout. Near Country Provisions is the real deal, and I can honestly say that I'd recommend them even if they weren't a sponsor. The meat and the local farmers they work with are just that good. Now, back to the show.
Let's jump into the lightning round. What is your favorite tiki cocktail? And if you don't have a favorite of all time, what's something you've been getting into more recently?
My favorite tiki cocktail is probably going to have to be the Chief Lapu Lapu. I first had one in 2018 at Hale Pele up in Portland, Oregon, and it blew my mind. Up until that point, my wife and I had gone to a number of so-called tiki bars, and each time we came away saying that was it, that's what the fuss was about, they were really underwhelming. And so we were visiting the Pacific Northwest, and okay, this Hale Pele place is supposed to be pretty good. Let's go try it out. And it was spectacular. It's a Martin Kate bar. He's one of the partners in it, and the build-out was fantastic. It was immersive, and as we were waiting to get in, we weren't even in yet because there was a line to get in. We got a menu and ordered something. I saw Chief Lapu Lapu, had no idea what it was. But I saw one of the primary ingredients was passion fruit, and I love passion fruit. I'm a nut for passion fruit, which is one of the reasons I got into growing passion vines and passion flowers. So I said, okay, I'll try this, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was everything that I had hoped a tiki cocktail would be. Tart, flavorful, sweet, good rum presence, and my wife was drinking her drink, and we both looked at each other and said, oh, we get it now. And since then, I've learned a little bit more about the Chief Lapu Lapu. Chief Lapu Lapu was a real person. He was a Filipino chieftain made famous because he killed Ferdinand Magellan in battle, the European explorer slash conqueror slash colonizer. And through friends that I have in the tiki community have since learned that Chief Lapu Lapu cocktail was most likely invented by Filipino bartenders who had or were working for Don the Beachcomber at the time. So they came up with the name to celebrate their own heritage in this tiki cocktail. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a fantastic drink, and we'll be sure to see if we can link to it and put the build over on the show notes. Next question. This is a niche question just for this episode. To you, Jayme, what makes a good tiki mug, and are there any trends or designs in the tiki mug world right now that have you particularly excited?
I love the individual artistry. It's always, well, I won't say always. In 2000, there was almost no tiki mugs except for whatever you could find in thrift stores held over from the previous age of tiki. Then Tiki Farm started up, and shortly after that, I believe Monk Tiki started up. And those were kind of the only players in town for a while. And for them, it was a labor of love back then. They're huge now. They do a lot of great stuff. But I'm seeing a lot of individual one-person operations starting up. People are chucking the day job, going full-time into ceramics. There's one guy is designing on computer and 3D printing all of his base molds or prototypes for his mugs, and then casting molds from that and then pouring his ceramics. There's a guy, Omar, runs Oak Wash out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, makes some fantastic, really inventive mugs there in his home shop, which he has built up over the past 2 years. Coxon and Dunsel out of Houston have done some really fun crossover pop culture mashups. I don't know if Peter Jackson or Andy Serkis ever listens to this podcast, but he's got a Gollum head mug that he has done that is, looks like it could have come straight out of Weta Workshop. So just the incredible diversity and freedom of these individual artists that are following their passion, that just inspires me. It's really great. And there's a lot of nice mass-produced mugs out there as well, but I really enjoy the enthusiasm and the excitement that surrounds these individual mug makers.
Yeah, in that respect, I suppose that Etsy might also be a decent place to start looking for some of those more one-off, more artist-inspired mugs. Of course, you listed some great ones, so we'll link to those too. Yeah, it's crazy. As I listen to you name all these people, it seems like they're, it's almost like you're repping friends, and I'm sure that you haven't met a fraction of these people, but it's one thing that I think it speaks to is the sense of community in the tiki world, and I think that is certainly something to take away from this as well. As it just seems to be a generally welcoming place to hang out.
And it's also the phenomenon of social media. A lot of these places, people in places I never would have known of had it not been for social media. Now, just like with you and me, we first connected over social media when I called you to task for omitting Fashionola when you were talking about the hurricane. So, it's just an intermeshed, interlinked community. And these people are really receptive. I mean, you approach someone and want to talk or have a question or offer them a compliment, that strikes up a conversation, and 2 years later you meet somewhere by chance. It's one of those things. I mean, you just meet people that you never would have come across before. That's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Widowmaker question: cocktail with anyone, past or present. Who would it be? Where would you go? What would you drink? Just kind of paint us a picture.
I've got two answers for you, because I have actually been thinking about this for a couple of years as I've listened to your podcast. The first, I think, would be pretty obvious. First person I would have a drink with would be Don Beach at Don the Beachcombers circa 1937. I choose 1937 because he was at the height of his prowess. At that point, most of his signature cocktails had been completed and were on the menu. He hasn't started branching out with multiple locations at that point. Trader Vic had just started up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So that was kind of the pre-golden age right there. And I would let him hold forth. I would just say, what do you have? What do you want to show off? Because he was always throwing something back and forth together. Vic was great with the food and the culinary aspect, but really Trader Vic's claim to fame is the Mai Tai. That's his one big cocktail. You look at Don Beach, and he's got the zombie, he's got the Cobra's Fang, he's got the Jet Pilot, he's Navy Grog. I mean, Don really had a palate that lent itself to amazing cocktails. And some of his later ones were actually created by the Filipino bartenders, and Don put his name on it and took credit for it. So I don't want to erase anyone there, the four famous bartenders back in the back shop. But, there's no question that Don started off, really pumping out some amazing drinks. So I would just say, my drinks are in your hands, sir. Mix as you will. The second, I suspect you're not going to expect. I would go to the Eagle and Child pub in Oxford, same year, 1937,
The
Bird and the Baby, and have a pint with the Inklings, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Charles Williams, and everyone else. I would probably go with a porter, maybe a nut brown ale, but nothing too exotic because I wouldn't want them to look at me askance. But I would just sit back and listen. I would just sit back and listen to these Oxford legends just holding forth about everything, arguing over whatever writing project they had at the time, reading selections of their work, and I suspect getting pissed drunk. I think that would be a blast, absolute blast. Be a fly on the wall right there.
So I have been able to visit the Eagle and Child pub, and I'm ashamed to say, man, this is embarrassing. This was in 2010, so about 11 years and change ago. I went to the Eagle and Child. It was March, maybe late March, early April in Oxford, and at that time there was a beer out called Sign of Spring, and it was a green beer. So I can say that I went and drank a green beer at the Eagle and Child. Real high point in my my drinking career right there. But I was only 21. Actually, I wasn't even 21 at that point. I was only 20 years old at that point. So hopefully we'll forgive past Eric for his beer transgressions. But that's a fantastic answer.
Well, the green makes it classy.
Yeah, classy or grassy.
Last one here. Any controversial views in the spirits, cocktail, or tiki world?
Hold me back. I would dearly wish that all these newly starting micro/craft distilleries that pop up all across the country would just stay the hell away from rum unless they're serious about it. I think their early production, and you know this, they all want to make whiskey, which there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But if you're going to have legitimate whiskey, you got to age it for 4 years. And nobody wants to go without cash flow for 4 years. So what do? They make vodka, which I think is a cynical approach. I mean, it's pragmatic, but it's still cynical because they don't care about vodka. You know, most of the time I don't care about vodka, but the people who are making it don't care about vodka. If they want to have more than just vodka producing revenue streams, what do? They look, we'll do a white rum because that's a garbage drink. You know, they don't care about rum. And you know what? I've tasted them, and they produce garbage rum. It's a waste of time and resources, and it brings the whole category down. There is so much spectacular rum. There's so much spectacular unaged white rum out there that people should be drinking, yet they're making stuff destined for trash can punch and dragging the entire category down and giving the entire category a bad name. So I say, make whatever crappy vodka you want, but just stay the hell away from rum unless you are serious about it and want to do it right. Because you know what? Molasses is not as easy to ferment and distill as a mash with corn and barley. Okay? It's just not. And you're going to embarrass yourself and embarrass everyone else. So just stay the hell away from rum.
Unless you're serious about it. I like that. There are...
Now, see, Balcones Distillery up in Waco. Waco is not a town that you would associate with spirits at all, but they are a whiskey-focused distillery. But they have a serious aged rum that they do, Balcones rum, and it is quite good. Their expression is not overproof. I think it's like 90 proof. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's not the 40% ABV, and it is excellent. And they do a good job, so they get a pass. And anyone else who wants to invest the time and effort to produce a good rum gets a pass. But if you're just trying to crank it out there because rum's easy and it's a garbage liquor and nobody cares anyway, then no, don't even start. Don't even go there.
Amen. Well, we'll shout out a couple of rum friends here. We've got Kohana Rum out of Hawaii. They were recently on the podcast doing some incredible stuff. Equiano Rum, also recently on the pod, doing some really, really cool stuff. And our friends over at Line Distilling Company on the Eastern Shore, also putting out some great rum in the craft space. So if you know where to look, it's out there. But yes, couldn't agree more. Man, there's so much good rum in the world right now. It's just, it almost shows how insular America is as a nation, that the bad stuff has gotten so big, it shows like how poorly traveled our palates are when you look at some of these American craft spirits and be like, wow. Can't believe somebody's bottling this.
Well, I'm hoping rum continues on the trajectory it's currently on. Right now, the category is growing, but fairly slowly. That growth has allowed a lot of new and interesting expressions and companies to come on board with some phenomenal juice. So I want that to continue, the continued steady growth. I don't want it to catch fire and this be the year of rum and it skyrockets like bourbon and everyone's trying to do the rum version of Pappy Van Winkle. I don't want that because my pocketbook cannot handle that. But I want it to slow, steady, continuous rise and create more space for more better rums. And I'm looking forward to that because there's some fantastic stuff out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Last, I forgot to shout out my friend Chase at St. Benevolence. They have an amazing Clarin and also another Caribbean-style rum. So yeah, Jayme, this has been tremendous, my friend. Can you just take us through the digital ways to connect with you? Give us
your social media, give us your YouTube channel, and remind us that blog one more time, and we'll send everyone there to go and check out the Lagoon of Mystery and A Moment of Tiki.
Okay, on Instagram, I'm easily found at Lagoon of Mystery. That's dedicated to my home tiki bar and most of my tiki adventures. On YouTube, search for A Moment of Tiki, and I have random things, thoughts. Sometimes I even occasionally post builds that I do, but also go into cocktails and book reviews and even interviews on occasion. And I'm findable on the Facebook as Jayme Blaschke, or I have a page for A Moment of Tiki and also a page for Lagoon of Mystery, my home bar. So I'm pretty inescapable if you can just get the spelling right.
Beautiful, beautiful. We will link to all that on the show notes page, plus as many of the resources that you have listed as we can possibly put together. But Jayme, this has been fun, man, and I really appreciate you, what you do, the Lagoon of Mystery, and thanks so much for being a guest here on the Modern BARCART podcast.
My pleasure, Eric.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, there's two big things you can do for us here at Modern BARCART. One would be to tell your friends and family if you think they'd enjoy listening to us talk about cocktails. And if they don't download podcasts, they can always stream our episodes on their desktop directly from the show notes page at modernbarcart.com. The other thing you can do to help would be to head on over to iTunes or wherever you download your podcasts and leave us a review. 5 stars are great, but we're more interested in your feedback. And the beauty is, the more reviews we have, the easier it will be for other folks out there to learn about our show. We're trying to start a cocktail revolution here, and by spreading the word, you're helping us fight the good fight. You can always reach us by emailing podcast@modernbarcart.com if you're looking for cocktail or bartending advice, or if you're a pro who would like to pull up a mic and be interviewed for all to hear. Also, definitely follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Modern BARCART for cocktail porn, recipes, and entertaining tips. And keep an eye out for new product releases and special offers, which are happening all the time. We love our listeners, and we really enjoy giving you exclusive discounts and sneak peeks at our latest and greatest cocktail projects. This episode may be over, but for you, the mixological fun and adventures are just beginning, so remember, folks, drink responsibly and experiment boldly. This episode was made possible with editing and sound design by Samantha Reed, tiki bar building insights, botanical resources, and playlist recommendations courtesy of Jayme Blaschke, and a little bit of interview magic by yours truly. This has been a Modern BARCART production, copyright 2021.